Welcome to the London Commercial Offices podcast with me, your host, Steve Berridge, Managing Director at Fidgens Cost Management. This is a podcast where we share the stories, career paths, lessons and insights from some of the industry's most influential people. Anything contained within our podcast should not be considered professional advice, and if you haven't done so already, please hit the subscribe or follow buttons to ensure you don't miss any of the amazing guests we've got coming up. It also really helps us grow the show. Thanks. Today we're joined by Oli Cohen, partner at BELCOR, a renowned city fringe agency providing services from leasing and investment through to tenant rep and a recently launched flex offering. Known to his friends and colleagues across the industry as Mr. Shoreditch, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Oli to the show.
Morning. How you doing?
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Oli. As you'll know from our previous episodes, I like to start right back at the beginning to give our audience a flavour of who you are and the journey that you've come through and sort of where you began. So if I can sort of ask a leading question, did you always have a passion for real estate?
No, I probably think on the contrary, actually. I never wanted to do real estate. My brother did it. My uncle did it. And on the opposite, it was just something that I almost wanted to avoid. So I left school and became a personal trainer. My immediate thing was that I just wanted to go out and earn money straight away. And I thought PTing was the way to do it. And so I went, did that. I loved it. And then a year on, I found that I was kind of really busy in the morning and also really busy in late afternoon. But during the day, I just had nothing on. So sure. I sat there in the day and I was watching Antiques Roadshow and I was watching Jeremy Kyle. And I thought, right, I really need to get a full-time job, especially when you start realizing the prices of antiques because you're watching it so much. You kind of thought to yourself, right, I need to do something a bit more permanent. So
what were your peers doing at that time in terms of all your friends?
Yeah, so all my peers went to uni. I didn't want to do it. I just had a desperation, I think, to start my own business and start earning money. And PTing was the quickest way, in my view, of doing that. Going out there, I was always entrepreneurial at school, so I had a few different businesses. One was
selling sweets, as everyone does.
One, I did events, and so I ran a few different events, and then I actually sold our school. I went to a school called King Alfred in Hampstead, and it was a very relaxed, non-uniform school. And so I actually created personal apparel, so kind of King Alfred branded hoodies, which is quite ironic, right? Because you go to a school that doesn't have uniform and then everyone wants a bit of branding and uniform for the school, a bit of identity. So I made King Alfred branded hoodies and then I sold those. So I loved being an entrepreneur. I had a number of different websites, doing a few kind of digital businesses at a time when like SEO and that kind of stuff was still fairly new to the world. And I loved doing that. And then I thought PT was my way of kind of going out there and making money for myself and being in control of my own decisions. So I built up a nice kind of local clientele. I think for me, the thought as I went on of running in the park at 6 a.m. on a Monday morning when it's -2 kind of lost appeal after a few months. So I then moved on to doing residential sales, a local estate agent in Edgware where I live. Did that for a year. Really enjoyed it. I mean, it was proper kind of hustle and grind, low end of the market. Did a mixture actually of lettings and sales, but it was very, very quick paced, very competitive. And it was different to commercial because with Resi, it was kind of UV all the other agents in the office, whereas commercial is much more about a team ethic and working together as a team and trying to do deals, you know, brainstorming, collaborating, rather than kind of Resi, you have your own desk and it's UV your colleague.
So that was so the estate agency was your first kind of foray into property. I mean, that's a hell of a jump from PT. What was the cause of that? The link? Did you know someone in the field? Was there a...
Yeah, there was a kind of friend of the family who... guy called Stephen Wayne. I used to work there on a Saturday. I did every 1 and 2 Saturdays. And when I found that PTing just wasn't going to be a full-time career, I thought, you know what, why not give this a go? And he was really happy to have me. I'd known him for ages, obviously, because I was there on the Saturday. I think he saw a bit of potential in me. So that then became my kind of first proper full-time job, I'd say.
Do you remember what you were earning back then as a full-time job? Because I can still remember what I was on as a graduate way back when.
Yeah, I think I was on 18 grand a year plus commission. I think we were on 10% commission for every deal that we did. And it was so competitive there, especially in the lettings world, whereby you would go and do a viewing with an applicant and you'd have to race back in your car before another agent who'd done a viewing of the same property got back before you. So it was a real kind of hustle and grind mentality, which I love. I just realized that if I am going to be in the property world, which I still wasn't sure of at the time, that I wanted to do it. I didn't want to do it local. I didn't want to do it in a North London, Edgware or Colindale, where they had their 2 offices. And so I moved on from there to doing media sales at a company called JN Media Group, which was actually selling adverts in the back of a Jewish newspaper. Probably the hardest job I will ever have. But actually, I look back on it and say that was the best experience that I could have had. And to me now has made a massive difference to my career, having had that job.
What were you doing as part of that role? Was that going out to find new advertisers? Was that managing existing accounts?
No, so almost in a kind of Yellow Pages vibe, I had to sell classified ads at the back of the paper. So if you can imagine you don't really have it so much anymore, but in the back of the newspaper, they had a page where you had a section for kind of builders and gardeners and all kind of local businesses to list their services. And so I had to basically cold call them, pitch them to try and advertise in the back of this Jewish newspaper. And there are kind of 2 Jewish newspapers. So there's the Jewish Chronicle and the Jewish News. And the direct contrast is one is like the Sun and the other is like the Daily Star. One has all the readership and the other probably has very little readership. And so I was working for the one that has little to probably almost no readership. So finally, when I did get through to someone who actually knew about Jewish papers, they immediately recognized the other paper, the Jewish Chronicle, not the one I was working for. And so it was the hardest grind to try and get there and get people to advertise. And the amount of rejection that I got, kind of call after call after call, you develop this like immunity,
thick skin,
and unbelievable level of thick skin, right? Because you're calling people and they're swearing and flying down the phone, telling you to get off the phone, and you come really numb to it after a while, in a good way, whereby you don't fear the rejection anymore. You just think, you know what, I'm just going to have a go. And so even bringing that to where we are now, doesn't even faze me whoever I'm calling, because I kind of always have that in the back of my head that at one stage I was calling a random builder and having him swear down the phone, ask me why I'm wasting his time. But, even in that job, I really excelled and I managed to somehow convince people to take adverts. I found a really good niche in that job in care homes because they seemed to have the kind of best marketing budgets of all. So I actually got to a stage there where I was really loving it. But again, I probably realized that looking at my peers I was early 20s at the time, and I had peers who were kind of early 30s/40s. And I think I felt I don't want to be doing this in 10, 15 years time. And at that stage, I didn't want to be doing property either.
Quite a mature mindset for a young 20-something guy to have that foresight, especially I assume you were earning quite well if you were doing quite well.
I definitely started earning what I'd say like was more like proper money, but it felt very 9 to 5, and the culture was, people got in at 9 and kind of left on the dot of 5, and everyone was earning okay, but no one was killing it. And I've always been highly, highly ambitious, still very driven. I kind of felt after probably 9 months, a year there, that there was going to be a ceiling as to where I could get to.
So we're early 20s, 22,
that was
23?
Early 20s, yeah. It took me to 21.
21. So we're 21. We've been a PT, an estate agent, and dabbled in advertising.
Yeah.
Where did the story go from there?
The story from there went, my best friend's dad used to run an agency in Spitalfields called Tarn and Tarn, who my partner at the time had worked for 20 plus years. And my partner, a guy called Paul Belchak, then decided to go off on his own, do his own thing and separate from Tarn and Tarn and form his own business. And so my best friend's dad, a guy called Selwyn Tarn, said, look, one of the guys who's been working for me for 20 plus years has gone on his own. He's got another partner with him, but they're looking for one more. Are you interested? I said, absolutely not. Don't want to do property. My brother does property. My uncle does property. I don't want to kind of fall into the traditional mold like so many do of falling into property or an accountant or recruitment. I always wanted to kind of be a bit away from the mold. And so he said, look, just go down and meet them. It's in Shoreditch. It's a really cool, interesting area. and you've got nothing to lose. So I said, fine, I'll go down. I had quite a negative mindset. This was in 2012, just as the London Olympics were starting. And then I met Paul and Greg, who are my partners now. And I thought, oh, interesting, because this is kind of quite a small startup style firm.
Which I imagine suited your entrepreneurial kind of mold quite well.
Exactly. And so while property was the last thing I wanted to do, the idea of being part of and growing a startup really appealed to me. And then I took a 10-minute walk around Shoreditch after and kind of fell in love. The area was just going through a boom on the back of the Olympics. So many kind of cool independent retailers, restaurateurs were starting up. You could feel as you walked around the street, it had a real kind of creativity, life, a lot of buzz around it. And I thought, compared to where I was working in Edgware and Highgate, I thought this is where the action is happening. And so I slept on it, woke up the next day and thought, despite 20 plus years of saying I'll never work in property, I thought, you know what, let's give it a go and see where we get to. And so the next day I started there.
Presumably that was your first foray into commercial property.
Yeah, so that was the start. We were at the time a 3-man band, very focused on Spitalfields and Shoreditch. We were a kind of niche family office working with a lot of private clients. And we probably at the time only had 10, 15 clients, I'd say, but it was very service focused business. And because we were small, we were able to give the clients such a good service. And that's how it started.
So how many years ago was that?
That was 12. So that started in 2012. Just really at the time when Shoreditch was coming into its boom. And so I was kind of thrown quite quick in the deep end, as you always are when you start in a small company, and very quickly had to try and learn the ropes of commercial. And
was the view that you always wanted to grow what is now BELCOR, into a much larger agency, or when you set it up, it was the vision was the three of you, and you were going to keep it small and and high service?
Yeah, to be honest, for the first probably 5-6 years, we were always very happy with just how we operated, which is a small family-run business. I'd call it more of a lifestyle business.
Sure.
We worked hard, but at the same time,
had fun.
Had fun. There was a good work-life balance around it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, I suppose, was kind of the attitude at the time. We were doing well every year. There was kind of, I'd say, gentle growth year on year. And then kind of over time, we went from 3 of us to 4 of us to 5 of us. I was completely openly very much an employee at the time. And so I wasn't, while maybe I had my own views as to where I'd like to go, I was very much in the hands of Paul and Greg, the partners, and doing my best to work in the business and prove myself, but leaving it to them as to kind of business direction.
Gotcha. So then that was 2012. So slow and steady organic growth up until, let's say, 2020?
Yeah, no, probably up until 2016, 17, I would say. And then we rebranded from Paul Belchak & Co. to Belchak Cohen. By that stage, there were 5 of us in the office. All of a sudden had an office manager, had 2 agents aside from Paul and Greg, and then started in the city fringe, becoming a bit more of a recognised outfit, started picking up a few bigger instructions.
And was that as a result of a mind shift internally and actively trying to do that, or had it just kind of critical mass? You've been there for long enough, the team grew, therefore your reputation grew accordingly.
Yeah, no, I think a bit of both. Definitely reputation was helping us. And I think we started focusing a bit more on our marketing side and actually getting our name and brand out there for the first time when we became Belchak Cohen, and started focusing a little bit more about branding and imagery and how we want to come across, which for the first 3-4 years of the business, especially when we were Paul Belchak & Co., it was really basic. I think can be open in saying that there wasn't much focus in terms of our look and appearance to the market. It was more about just making sure that we do the job for our client. But as Greg Cohen, who's one of my partners, started becoming a partner himself in the business, we rebranded Belchak Cohen. He kind of had an idea just to try and push it on to that next level in terms of kind of the branding and marketing. And then off the back of that, we started to pick up some more clients heading into 2017, 18.
So you had a couple of years run at full chat, new brand, established team, reputation, leading up to 2020. Do you want to talk me through kind of maybe the year before COVID, what that looked like as a business, the kind of deals that you were working on, clients you were working with, mood, and then we can obviously pick up the impact that COVID had upon that, and then talk about the changes to where we are now.
Yeah, so I think 2018, 2019 was probably the start of the transition for us as a business. It was whereby I would say me and another colleague, Joe, started having more and more involvement in the business. And Paul and Greg, who'd kind of anchored the business for so long, their involvement started to diminish slightly. And that was probably for us the start of a shift in terms of business direction and actually going from being a kind of older company to just starting to change to be a quite younger company in terms of workforce. By that stage, we got into 2018, we'd taken on two other colleagues as well who are both in their early 20s, Marcus Godfrey and Adam Sonning. And so it was a bit of an evolving landscape in that the business that started with two people in their 40s, 50s, all of a sudden we now had a workforce that were predominantly kind of early 20s and late 20s. 2018, 2019 was an amazing time for Shoreditch. The market had really started, picking up around here. And I look back at deals we did now and there were best bids on offices. We had some offices where we had 3, 4, 5 different bids, especially in 2018 from occupiers, and it's almost unfathomable to think about now.
What were those terms like? Were they were above asking terms?
Yeah,
how were they trying to sweeten the deals?
Yeah, I was looking back at one example the other day where we actually had tenants trying to offer a premium, cash money effectively, as an incentive for the landlord to try and have them as a tenant. And so, looking where we are in the world now and think about that, for me seems mad, but actually all these tenants wanted to be in Shoreditch. They saw it as the kind of hub of the media tech world, and the offices around here are synonymous with being really cool, interesting character office space. And so there wasn't a huge amount of supply. There wasn't as much building going on at the time, and demand was massive. And so rents were being pushed up. Rent freeze at one stage were sub 1 month per term certain. And we were doing a lot of deals with rents in the early mid-60s around here for kind of best-in-class space. That was a really good time. Obviously, no one anticipated COVID happening, and it kind of hit us out of nowhere. So all of a sudden, when you're going through that bit, and obviously we had Brexit, which started making life more difficult, then following on into COVID. Yeah, COVID was a real, oh my God, what is happening type moment.
We don't need to go into COVID too much. I think that's been covered to death over the last few years. But I mean, in terms of you guys as a business riding the wave of COVID, I mean, how many guys were you going into COVID?
So there was 7 of us, plus we had by that stage 3 in management, as there's 10 of us total.
How was that journey then?
To be honest, there's obviously the scare factor around everything that happened, and we were looking at it as a business thinking, oh my God, what's going to happen next month, 2 months? How are we going to keep the business going? Because it was so clear that office demand just fell off a cliff. Actually, that is our bread and butter as to how we make income. So how are we going to get through this? Inevitably, a lot of the guys were on furlough and working with the grants. But one of the beauties, I think, of us being entrepreneurial as a business is that it really allowed us to pivot. And that is always, the beauty of doing what we do, which is being a small niche agency who operate across all the used car sectors. So we don't just do offices, we do retail, we do leisure, we do investment, we do industrial. And so what COVID allowed us to do was to follow the money. We had slightly less focus on the office market, but the industrial market was booming because so many of the occupiers needed industrial space because of the way the digital online world was going. And so we did a lot of dark grocery store deals. We did a lot of deals with dark kitchen operators at the time.
For anybody listening that isn't familiar, can you just tell us what a dark kitchen is?
Yes, there were 2 very popular businesses in COVID. One was dark kitchen. So when, a lot of people don't know this, but actually when you go on Deliveroo and you order your food, maybe a Wagamama or an Honest Burger, a lot of the time you're not ordering it from the restaurant, you're ordering it from a production kitchen somewhere, which allows the restaurant to not all of a sudden have loads of delivery drivers come in, allows them to operate more seamlessly. And so at the time, the delivery side of those restaurant businesses was going wild, just massively expanding. And so a lot of these restaurants wanted their own separate production kitchen space away from their restaurants they could then operate from. And so we spent a lot of time working with those type of operators. And at the same time as that was happening, the rise of the dark grocery store business started happening. So Getir, Zap, which is the same concept. You can go on your phone, you can do your shopping from a business that doesn't actually have any real shop front. It doesn't have customers in. It's purely there to service a delivery customer. And so we did quite a few of those deals as well. And then aside from that, we did a lot of investment deals just to keep money coming in.
So you managed to ride the COVID wave and essentially come out the other side. I imagine, well, we know it's a very different landscape in terms of the office sector, office space, what employees are looking for in office space, and therefore what employers have to look for now to provide for. How did you guys kind of find your feet post-COVID in terms of, was there a clear, distinct switch in what your clients were now looking for, what they were searching for?
The biggest challenge with COVID was it was the waves. And so
uncertainty of
But, well, what would happen is you'd have all the measures calm down and it looked like things were good again. People were kind of going back to the office. Everything was positive. You'd get on client calls doing reporting and there was a bit more of a rosy outlook. People started taking offices again, and then very quickly another lockdown hit and demand fell off a cliff. And actually it was consistent amount of uncertainty that just made the market so difficult, because you never had a period of kind of 6 months to a year where everything was good and settled, and you never really knew what was coming next week or next month. And so deals became so hard to do because tenants wanted pandemic clauses in their leases, whereby if a pandemic hit, they would either only pay half rent or no rent. And landlords, some were willing to accept them and others were adamant they wouldn't accept them because they couldn't be in those positions, especially with the bank. I mean, if a pandemic went on for 2 years, they couldn't accept having 2 years of no rent. As an agent, you're negotiating the impossible, right? You've got a tenant who completely understandably doesn't want to be paying rent if they can't actually use their office or their restaurant or their retail shop. And you've got landlords who don't want to be in a position where their hands are tied and they're stuck for a year or 2 years with no rent. And so you're dealing with something that's completely unprecedented, and you're having to kind of make it up / find the right balance as you go along.
Now, you guys have published a book, an office fit-out book, comparing the different trends across the decades. So if we look at just taking a snapshot of pre-COVID, do you just want to, for people that perhaps aren't familiar with the office landscape, what that office landscape looked like in terms of a sort of fit-out level pre-COVID to where we are now, and then we can touch on your book and sort of what that offers?
Yeah, great. I think the most important thing to understand pre-COVID is going back to a world where everyone needed an office. And so there was a lid to every saucepan, right? There were kind of low-end offices, there was middle-of-the-rank offices, and there's kind of best-in-class offices. But the thought of companies working from home just wasn't there. So really, depending on where you were in the scale and budget, at some point you need an office. There were offices that were really poorly fitted out, but actually companies would just take them because they're good value, or especially in the outer fringe locations, that kind of market was good because, again, companies would see it as value to go into a Hackney Wick or Dalston or London Fields. Offered a lot of value compared to Shoreditch, Clerkenwell, King's Cross in the fringe. There were a lot of offices on the market which I would say were average, typical desks, chairs, not that much else to it, but they served a purpose for the workplace. Supply levels, obviously pre-COVID, were pretty good. Demand was pretty good. So it was kind of an even keel ratio. But then COVID just changed the whole landscape. So I think in terms of the office world, that literally flipped it on its head. And with the rise of remote working and working from home, that has completely changed what I believe that the office now is.
And so in terms of then your take on what, and it kind of feeds upstream from what employees require to get them back to the office, that's what employers have to offer. Therefore, that's what they're coming to you to find. So what are employers now looking for when they're coming to you in terms of search requirements?
Well, so I think this is the change, right? Is that we've gone from people needing an office to people wanting an office. And actually that's the biggest thing for any landlord or anyone out there to understand. And so whereby once upon a time, that kind of average office, may have carpet, may have blended ceiling tiles. Once upon a time, somewhere it would find demand for a company because of the value that it offered. Now, actually, and I'll ask you a good question, is who do you think is the most important person for us to try and attract into an office? Do you think it's kind of CEOs and decision makers, or do you think actually it's more catered for employees?
Well, I'd say it's got to be the employees. From a fundamental sense, the CEO is only concerned with having an active workforce that wants to come into an office to do the work, albeit the employees don't pay the bills as such in terms of the rent. But I think, it's got to be fed bottom up in terms of that.
Right. So that's exactly it. And actually, I think from every CEO, founder that we speak to, or at least the large majority of them, they want to be in the office. They know that actually it's good for efficiency, it's good for culture, it's good for collaboration. Their challenge is actually they know a lot of other companies are offering remote working policies, and they know that there is an appetite for staff to be at home. And so the main question with offices now, and this is why we wrote the book, is how can you get the everyday employee, everyday member of staff into the office? And the answer to that is that the office has to be an upgrade on the home. And so at home, you've got your really nice sofa area, you've got your TV, you've got your lounge space, you've got your fridge, you've got your kitchen. And so you need to come into the office to be excited to go in. And actually, if you're just going into a mundane office, chances are on a Monday or a Friday, so I'd much rather work from home. Now flip that on this head and all of a sudden say that an office has a yoga room, it has a ping pong table, it's got a pool table, it has a free beer tap and wine bar. And that changes, right? Because all of a sudden the employees are really excited to come in. And if you have a really exciting, impressive office with amazing breakout areas, somewhere that's going to be inspiring for people to come in and work every day, and you've got a building that has roof terraces or balconies or tenant lounges, all of a sudden you have the workforce wanting to come in. And that is still where I don't think enough offices in the market are offering that degree of quality, or understanding that actually the person they should be focusing the office product on is the employee. And we wrote the book to say that if you don't do that to your office, and actually the office just becomes a place where it's desks and chairs, then you're going to fall behind. And you look at landlords out there like Derwent, who've developed the most amazing tenant lounge space, DL28, just off Old Street roundabout, where it feels like walking into a hotel lobby when you go in there. It's amazing. And it has a coffee bar area. And actually, they are almost ahead of the game in understanding that that is something that somebody wakes up on a Monday or Friday and is going to say, I want to go into the office because such a nice environment to be working from, plus having the benefits of the lounge space. We really emphasize on the book that if you don't invest in the office and you don't provide the right level of quality, you don't get the fit out right, then you're going to fall into this big glut of supply that's on the market and actually just end up falling behind.
And in terms of a split, so some of the companies that you work for to go find space for, you're essentially providing them fitted space. And then you're finding them grade A, Cat A space, which they'll then do their fit out. What's the sort of split for you as a business in terms of those two tranches?
Yeah, so it's probably a pre-COVID, post-COVID question as well. So pre-COVID, I'd say it was 60-40, maybe even 70-30 to people starting to want fitted space, going into kind of 2019.
So the majority actually taking Cat A space and doing their own fit out?
No, majority at that time going 2019, early in 2020 was starting to want fitted space. We were seeing that curve starting to happen. And actually pre-COVID, we were speaking to landlords to say, look, if you want to get ahead of the game and you want to be the chosen option, you need to fit your space. There was resistance, a lot of resistance. Landlords didn't want to spend the money when they saw other Cat A products going. But flip that to post-COVID, 90 to 95% fitted space now. And the simple answer is that we've developed a bit of an American model here where there's an expectation that a tenant is walking into kind of fully plug and play space, and cash is tight generally in the market with where the economy is. So the days of a tenant coming in and spending 300, 500, £1 million on a fit out are just so few and far between. The only exceptions to that, I think, are when you have a self-contained building that has amazing bones and offers amazing character, where you may have a media company come in and they want to put their kind of branding and personality on the space, especially when you're dealing with the bigger size of the market. But for your general everyday 1,000 to 5,000 square feet, it almost always has to be fitted now.
And then in terms of, we spoke about sort of the landlords now having to offer a nice Cat Plus, essentially, a finished product for the tenant. On the investment side that you guys get involved with, in terms of stock that isn't perhaps in prime location, or perhaps where you've got a landlord that doesn't want to have that capital investment in terms of to offer a really nice Cat Plus product, what do you see happening with those buildings moving forward? Do you see them sitting there doing nothing? Do you see them being rented but at significant discounts? Do you see them being spun off to different use classes? What are you seeing around the Shoreditch kind of area?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. Now that the overwhelming majority of products should be fitted, I always try and compare it to when I'm speaking to clients, to a Premier League table. And so I try and say to them, on average now, when a tenant is going out, or a company is going out and they're looking for offices, they're looking probably an average, I'd say, of 10 to 20 offices, right? And so say it's 20, your office that we're working on is then going to be one of 20 on that list. And really, to get to the top of that list, you need to be the Arsenal or the Man City, in my view. Or on the other side, if you want to offer a bit more value, it's kind of better to be in the relegation zone. But what you really don't want is to be stuck in the middle and to kind of be that Brighton, Crystal Palace, because you're the worst of both worlds. You're not offering really good value. And so actually, we try and say to clients, that is the worst place to be. If you have a 6/7 out of 10 office, you're not going to be chosen by the tenants who are out there looking for best in class space, which so many are, nor are you going to be out there for those few tenants who are still out there looking for kind of budget value space because they don't want to work from home. In the same way that I'd say has had a bit of an effect on the outer fringe market, because there's now a lot of fitted space in Shoreditch, Clerkenwell and King's Cross that you can get at 45 quid a foot, 50 quid a foot, especially tenant disposal space. It's meant that the outer fringe areas that always served as really good value in comparison now don't anymore, because if you can get space in Shoreditch at 40 quid a foot, all of a sudden being in Dalston or London Fields at 30 quid a foot isn't a huge discrepancy. And so for those spaces, their option, I think, is to go that much bigger and that much harder in making their space something special, so that actually people are like, you know what, I'm saving 10 quid a foot, but I am getting an absolute wow space. Space that
still getting the end result, still being able to attract talent, but actually it's still only 30 quid a foot.
Yeah,
so there's
correct.
the value and the wow factor.
Exactly right. So I think if you're a company and you're going to take space in and out of fringe area, you need to be incentivized by the value, but you also need to be incentivized by the quality and knowing that what you're getting is that much better than perhaps something in Shoreditch or Clerkenwell. And when I say that, that could be wellness rooms, it could be yoga studios, could be ping pong, could be a beer tap, could be amazing breakout areas, tenant lounges, all the things that will excite members of staff to actually come in and want to come to the office.
We've had a big shift since COVID in terms of Cat Plus offerings, the whole having to attract staff. I think you call it resi-mercial in your book, offering a premium product. What do you think the landscape looks like then for the next 12, 24 months moving forward? And I think, and as a business, how are you looking to tackle that? Do you see it staying as a status quo for the next 24 months? People still working from home 1 to 2 days a week, or do you see that tailing away? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, the change is happening. It's not happening at a rapid rate. And by this, I mean kind of the return to the status quo. Going back probably 12 months ago, there was quite a clear pattern for a lot of companies of a 3-day week where companies would give their staff Monday and Friday working from home. I think that is changing now, and actually Monday is moving back towards going back to the office. And I think some of the result of that is companies clearly realizing that they're missing something with people not being in the office a lot of the time. And hopefully the power is kind of moving it back to the employer. And actually they're saying, look, we need you back in the office on a Monday. And so I think we're moving back to 4 days a week in the office. Friday, there's just no getting away from it. Footfall in and around this area is 70-80% down. And that doesn't just have an effect on the office market, it has a massive effect here on retailers, restaurateurs, and the whole domino effect. You see people who are pushing work from home, but not taking into account of all the businesses in the city who are losing, even small local businesses who are being massively hit as a result of that having happened. And so looking forward probably over the next 12, 24 months, I think that Monday will end up being a proper day in the office, and we'll go back to a kind of full 4 days a week in the office. I'm not convinced that Friday will change, definitely not in the short term. I think that there's too much of a push at the moment from employees to have that day working from home, and almost, I think maybe slightly unfairly, but a half day Friday. Because I think for people working at home, for so many, that realistically is what it is. And so I don't see that changing in the near future.
Yeah, which is 20% of the week, 20% of the desks that you're, as an employer, you're paying rent for that aren't being utilised. Do you think the combination of that is driving the big push into flex? In terms of, it's now socially acceptable for large corporates to now take flex office space as opposed to traditional leases. And I know you guys have had a recent launch of your BELCOR Flex offering.
Yeah, so we launched BELCOR Flex basically to stop any inquiries falling through the gap. What we were noticing is we'd sometimes speak with applicants, show them 5 or 10 different options, and then we'd be on the phone to them a couple of days later and they'd say, we've decided to take a 4 or an office group or a WeWork. And so we realized we were missing a trick, and I think Flex has become really attractive for 2 reasons. One is the flexibility that it offers, and actually there are a lot of businesses out there at the moment that don't know what the next 12, 24, 36 months looks like, and actually to be able to take a flexible term for 6 months, 12 months during this still, in my view, a period of uncertainty where businesses are still trying to work out what their future direction looks like. It allows them to kick the can down the road. And I think the second reason is that there has been a hotelification of flexible workspace, and actually they probably had the foresight to see what was happening in the market, and I think have adapted a lot quicker. And so when you go into so many impressive flex spaces now, it is like walking into a hotel lobby. They've kind of rebranded the term from tenants to clients, a lot of them now call them, and there is that proper level of customer service there. And so you walk into these flex spaces and going into the equivalent of a hotel lounge, and you have the free coffee, free beer, you have the yoga/gym they do, and all the kind of community.
All of the things that we spoke about earlier on, landlords need to offer, are now being catered for.
That's why I think they are ahead of the curve. And this is what needs to happen. I think will start happening more and more to the traditional office market. And the 2 markets are merging. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind. And it's why, again, we were kind of a bit ahead of the game in launching BELCOR managed, powered by Kit, because we saw a situation whereby a lot of tenants want their own culture and identity in terms of having their own space, but they want all the convenience of being in a managed office where they don't have to think about paying their bills and business rates and repairs and maintenance that you do in a traditional office. And so there are more and more deals happening like that now, where you're having companies who want their own brand and personality and want to take traditional space, but they want all the convenience of having it managed.
And to be fair, it's hard to understand why they wouldn't, in that sense, businesses want to focus on what they do best, their business, and not with the added complexities that you've just gone through.
Yeah, and I always compare it to Deliveroo, right? So I go home after work probably 2-3 days a week, and I know that Deliveroo is going to cost me more money than cooking at home. But actually, the convenience of just tapping 2-3 times and the time saver that it will get, I'm willing to pay more. And businesses and companies have the same attitude, that actually they know they're paying a 15-20% premium to have it managed and the convenience of having it managed, but they would rather do that because they're then saving time that they can focus on their company and their business.
And there's an opportunity cost that comes with that.
Completely.
In terms of for them. Then in terms of you guys as a business then for the next sort of 12 months, what's your focus? What are you looking to do? Type of clients that you're looking to work with?
Yeah, it's a really exciting time for us. We've definitely gained a lot more market share in the city fringe. I think there's no hiding away from the fact that Compton are kind of head and shoulders above everyone else, and they've probably set the benchmark to be there for us to try and get to that level. And that's what we're ambitious in trying to achieve and continue to grow. And there's now 13 of us total. So we've come a long way in the last few years, and our size of instructions has grown a lot, where we're now kind of regularly taking on 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 square foot instruction. So for us, it's just starting to pour kind of gasoline on the fire. We're growing, but we want to really push it to that next level. And we're looking back at 2021, where I came on as partner, and I really wanted to kind of push us from that family agency into being more of a major player in the City Fringe, kind of rebrand the business to make it more aligned with the Shoreditch stroke City Fringe market. So we're hopefully seen now as a kind of younger, cooler brand with a lot of energy and quite synonymous with Shoreditch, which is quite a cool and creative area. We want to keep pushing. I think it's really important for us that I always say property agencies have become marketing agencies just by virtue of the fact, how you market yourself is also seen as a reflection of how you market properties.
Gone are the days are floor plans and a brochure. Thanks very much.
Exactly. And so our constant challenge here is what can we do to get eyeballs, right? Especially on social. And what can we do to shake things up where actually people look at us and say, oh, I've never seen that done before in terms of marketing. So we are constantly striving to come up with a next way of making marketing exciting and getting people, whether it's videography or whatever it may be, some of the new 3D glasses where you can walk around an office and have like a POV point of view from looking through those glasses. We want to try and keep pushing the boundaries to make property marketing more exciting.
Interesting. You talk about the VR glasses. We had Ella on from AHMM talking about how wasteful Cat A fit outs are. And part of that solution to that was, Cat A fit outs occur because agents want to let space and they want the Cat A there to show a tenant. But if you can remove that Cat A fit out, but offer that visual and that, offering as part of a VR experience, tenant can then do their own Cat A and B.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think there would be help in that from probably an earlier stage as well, pre-landlord fitting out, as to getting a clear understanding of actually what tenants are looking for. And so you were speaking earlier about resi-commercial, which is probably like, especially in the City Fringe, our strongest belief, a kind of cross between the commercial and residential feel. And more often now we're finding that tenants want that kind of home from home feel in the space. So you're leaving your home, but you're going to an equally comfortable, relaxed environment with a big focus on kind of sofas, breakout area where you can sit in your office and there may be bean bags or whatever it would be, where you feel you're not just in a workplace, you're actually in somewhere where you can enjoy rather than just work. And that is so important to where the office market has moved, and for landlords to try and understand that the big sell for tenants now is how can you try and get them and get their staff in. They really enjoy being in the office rather than just there to do their work. Because if you're going to persuade them to leave their home, you're going to need to dangle a carrot to try and get them in, get them excited about coming to the office and spending the day there. And actually, if you've got those 3D glasses on that could show the vision of that, that will also be really helpful in enticing tenants in.
It all comes back to getting the staff back in the office and how we do that. I think that's a really good place to stop today. I've really enjoyed our chat. I think for anyone that's listening, if they're interested in finding space or just finding out what's going on in the market, what we'll do is we'll pop your contact details in the show notes. And I'll also put a link to your book so they download that if they need to.
Thank you.
But look, really enjoyed today. Oli, thanks ever so much for coming on. We'll speak again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. Really appreciate it.
This podcast is sponsored by Fidgins, a London-based cost consultancy. Please visit fidgins.co.uk to find out more about our market-leading service and some of the amazing clients we get to work with. We're super open to guest recommendations for this podcast, so if there's anyone in the industry you'd like to get on the show, please visit the website or send me a message on LinkedIn and I'll try to make it happen. Thanks and bye for now.